Picture this. It is just before dawn over the Persian Gulf. The sky is still dark, silent, then suddenly, radar screens light up, operators freeze, a blip appears, then another, then it vanishes. Not because it is gone, but because it is moving too fast to track. On one side, the most advanced missile defense systems ever built, billions of dollars, decades of research, layers of protection designed to stop anything in the sky. On the other, a weapon that does not follow the rules. It does not fly straight. It does not slow down. And by the time you detect it, it is already too late. This is not a drill. This is not speculation. This is happening right now. Iran has just revealed what it claims is a hypersonic missile capable of bypassing even the most sophisticated U.S. defense systems. And if that claim holds, even partially, it changes the balance of power overnight. If you want to understand how we got here, what this weapon can actually do, and what it means for the future of global security, you need to stay with us. Because what you are about to hear will show you exactly why U.S. defense planners are suddenly facing a problem they may not be able to solve, why the next conflict could look nothing like the last, and why the world may have just entered a completely new era of warfare. And that brings us to what happened next. Welcome to Crisis Reporting. This is the channel where we break down the most important geopolitical events shaping our world, clearly, precisely, and without the noise. If you want to stay ahead of fast-moving global crises like this one, make sure you subscribe right now, because you do not want to be the last to know when moments like this reshape the balance of power. And turn on notifications so you never miss a critical update, because stories like this are evolving in real time, and the details matter. Now, let us start with exactly what happened. Before we go any further, if you are getting value from this breakdown and want clear, fact-based analysis on stories that are shaping global power in real time, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because we are covering developments like this as they unfold. And the details you are about to hear could change how you see this entire situation. Now let us talk about the angle nobody is discussing. Here is the dimension of this story that most coverage is not paying attention to, and it could be the most important factor of all. This is not just about a missile. This is about messaging. What most analysts are missing is that Iran does not need this system to be perfect. It only needs it to be believable, because deterrence is not built on certainty. It is built on perception, and perception can be just as powerful as reality. Everything we told you in the first part is true. The missile was unveiled. The specifications were announced. The claims were made. But here is what makes it more complicated than it first appears. There is a long documented history of states using strategic ambiguity to shape adversary behavior. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union routinely exaggerated capabilities, not necessarily to fight wars, but to prevent them. Iran understands this playbook. Now let us go deeper. Iran's military doctrine has always relied on asymmetric warfare. It does not try to match the United States tank for tank or jet for jet. Instead, it focuses on areas where smaller investments can create disproportionate impact: missiles, drones, cyber operations, and proxy forces. Hypersonic weapons, real or perceived, fit perfectly into that doctrine, because they attack not just physical defenses, but psychological confidence. Let us zoom in for a moment to one room, one briefing, one map on the wall. A U.S. defense planner is looking at potential conflict scenarios in the Middle East. Traditionally, those scenarios include timelines, how long it takes for threats to be detected, tracked, and intercepted. Now insert uncertainty. If even a small percentage of incoming missiles can evade interception, every calculation changes. Suddenly, no target is fully protected. Not bases, not ships, not infrastructure. That forces a shift from defense to preemption. And preemption is where escalation risk explodes. But here is where it gets even more critical, and where most Western coverage ignores the deeper layer. Iran is not operating in isolation. Over the past decade, Iran has deepened military and technological ties with countries like Russia and, to a lesser extent, China. According to reports from outlets like the Wall Street Journal and NBC News, there has been increasing cooperation in areas such as drone technology and missile components. Now, there is no confirmed evidence that Iran's hypersonic program is directly built on foreign designs. But the timing matters. Russia has already deployed hypersonic weapons in Ukraine. China has conducted multiple hypersonic glide vehicle tests. The knowledge base exists, and knowledge spreads. This is not just about one country reaching a milestone. This is about the diffusion of a new class of weapons into more hands. But let us add another layer: sanctions. Iran has been under heavy economic sanctions for years. Its economy has faced inflation, currency devaluation, and restricted access to global markets. In that context, a high-profile military reveal serves multiple purposes. Externally, it signals strength. Internally, it reinforces legitimacy. It tells the population, despite economic pressure, we are advancing. We are not isolated. We are not falling behind. That internal narrative matters more than it appears, because domestic stability is a strategic priority. Now connect that back to the global stage. If Iran can convince its adversaries that its capabilities have crossed a threshold, even if partially, it gains leverage in negotiations, deterrence, and regional influence. This is not just about hitting targets. This is about shaping decisions before a shot is ever fired, and that brings us to the twist that should concern policymakers the most. If adversaries believe the system works, they will act as if it does. And in geopolitics, perception-driven decisions can be just as irreversible as reality-driven ones. So the question is no longer just, does the missile work exactly as claimed? The real question is, what happens now that the world thinks it might? And that brings us to what this actually looks like on the ground, because the technical reality of this threat may be even more unsettling than the narrative around it. Now let us talk about what this actually looks like on the ground. Start with geography. The Persian Gulf is one of the most militarized waterways in the world. At any given moment, the United States maintains a significant naval presence in the region, often including carrier strike groups, guided missile destroyers, and surveillance aircraft. We are talking about assets like the USS Arleigh Burke-class destroyers equipped with the Aegis combat system, designed to track and intercept incoming missile threats. These ships carry SM-2, SM-3, and SM-6 interceptors, each built to handle different types of targets. On land, systems like Patriot and THAAD are deployed across key locations in the Middle East, including Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and other allied positions. These systems are layered to create overlapping coverage zones. On paper, this is one of the most sophisticated defense networks ever assembled. But here is the problem. It was designed for a different era of warfare. Traditional ballistic missiles follow a predictable arc: boost phase, mid-course phase, terminal phase. That predictability allows radar systems to calculate intercept points. Hypersonic glide vehicles and maneuverable re-entry vehicles change that entirely. Instead of following a fixed trajectory, they can adjust course mid-flight. They can fly at lower altitudes, reducing radar detection time, and they can approach from unexpected angles. Now let us put that into a scenario. A U.S. Navy destroyer in the Gulf detects a launch from Iranian territory. The radar picks up the initial boost phase, but then tracking becomes unstable. The object begins to maneuver. The system attempts to calculate an intercept solution. But the target's path keeps changing. Seconds pass, and in hypersonic terms, seconds are everything. By the time a reliable intercept window is established, it may already be too late to launch a successful defense. Now add saturation. Iran does not rely on a single missile. Its doctrine emphasizes volume, launching multiple projectiles simultaneously to overwhelm defenses. Even the most advanced systems have limits. Interceptors are finite. Radar processing capacity is finite. If multiple maneuverable targets are incoming at once, the system must prioritize. It cannot stop everything. That is where asymmetry comes into play. The United States spends billions to defend against threats. Iran spends significantly less to create them. A single hypersonic-capable system, even if limited in number, can force disproportionate defensive spending and strategic recalibration. Now let us talk about specific targets. U.S. military bases in the region, such as Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar or naval facilities in Bahrain, are within range of Iran's claimed 2,400-kilometer strike capability. So are critical infrastructure nodes, oil facilities, ports, command centers, and then there is Israel. Iran has repeatedly stated that its missile program includes the capability to reach Israeli territory. Systems like Arrow are designed for high-altitude interception, but hypersonic threats complicate that equation. Now consider timing. Hypersonic missiles compress decision-making windows to minutes or less. That creates what military planners call use it or lose it pressure. If you believe an incoming strike cannot be stopped, the incentive shifts toward acting first. That is how deterrent stability begins to erode. But here is where it gets even more dangerous, because the United States is not standing still. The Pentagon is actively developing its own hypersonic weapons and countermeasures. Programs like the Conventional Prompt Strike and the Hypersonic Attack Cruise Missile are already in advanced stages, but deployment timelines matter. If one side fields a capability before the other has a reliable defense, there is a window of vulnerability. And windows of vulnerability are when conflicts are most likely to occur. Now let us paint the worst-case scenario, the one that keeps strategists awake. A regional crisis escalates. Multiple launches are detected. Some are intercepted. Some are not. Uncertainty spreads. Commanders must decide, is this a limited strike or the beginning of something larger? Communication channels are strained, response times shrink, and in that compressed timeline, one miscalculation, one incorrect assumption can trigger a chain reaction that cannot be reversed. That is the reality of hypersonic warfare. It is not just faster weapons, it is faster decisions, with less information and higher stakes. And that brings us to the broader global dimension, because there is another player watching all of this very closely, and their position may be the most complicated of all. Let us pull the camera back because there is a second player whose stakes may ultimately exceed everyone else. China. Here is the number that changes everything. China imports roughly 70% of its oil, and a significant portion of that supply flows through the Persian Gulf. According to data cited by the International Energy Agency and multiple reports from outlets like Reuters and the Wall Street Journal, China is the largest importer of Iranian oil, often through indirect or sanctioned channels. Now think about what that means. Any instability in this region is not just a regional problem. It is a direct threat to China's economic lifeline. But here is the contradiction. China benefits from a stable Middle East, stable oil flows, predictable prices, controlled risk. At the same time, China has strategic reasons to support or at least tolerate Iran as a counterweight to U.S. influence in the region. That creates an impossible balancing act. On one hand, China does not want escalation that disrupts energy markets. On the other, it does not want to weaken a partner that complicates U.S. strategic dominance. Now let us go deeper. China has already invested heavily in hypersonic technology. Its DF-17 hypersonic glide vehicle has been tested and showcased as part of its military modernization efforts. So from a technological standpoint, China is not surprised by this development. But from an economic standpoint, it is exposed. Let us run a scenario. Tensions rise. Shipping lanes in the Strait of Hormuz become risky. Insurance costs for tankers spike. Some shipments are delayed or rerouted. Even a partial disruption could remove millions of barrels per day from the global market. Oil prices surge. For China, that means increased import costs, pressure on manufacturing, and potential slowdowns in economic growth. And remember, China's economy is already navigating challenges, property sector instability, shifting global demand, and supply chain realignments. Now layer in energy volatility. This is not just a geopolitical issue for Beijing, it is a domestic stability issue. But here is where it gets even more complex. China has positioned itself in recent years as a diplomatic broker in the Middle East. In 2023, it played a role in facilitating a normalization agreement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. That was a strategic move. It signaled that China is not just an economic actor, but a political one. Now, with rising tensions and new military variables like hypersonic weapons, China faces a test. Can it maintain stability among partners with competing interests, or will it be forced to choose sides, directly or indirectly? Because choosing sides has consequences. Support Iran too openly, and it risks backlash from Gulf states and potential secondary sanctions. Distance itself from Iran, and it loses leverage against the United States. That is the dilemma. Now connect this to the broader global order. The United States has long been the primary security guarantor in the Middle East. Its military presence has underwritten stability, at least in terms of protecting shipping lanes and deterring large-scale conflict. If new technologies begin to erode that security guarantee, or even create the perception that it is weakening, other powers will step in to fill the gap. China is watching that possibility very closely, because influence follows instability. But influence also comes with responsibility, and responsibility in a region this volatile is not something any global power can control completely. So here is the contradiction that defines this moment. China wants stability. Iran benefits from strategic uncertainty. The United States is trying to maintain deterrence in a changing technological landscape. Those three forces are now intersecting, and when they intersect under pressure, the outcome is rarely predictable. Which brings us to the final and most urgent question. What happens next? This is where all the threads converge. We are now at a point where technology, perception, and geopolitics are colliding, and the next moves will define how dangerous this situation becomes. So let us break this into two clear scenarios. Scenario A, escalation. Path tensions continue to rise. Iran conducts further tests or demonstrations of its hypersonic capability. The United States responds by increasing its military presence in the region. More naval assets, more missile defense deployments, more surveillance. Israel, feeling directly threatened, accelerates its own preemptive planning. Now add one trigger, a misinterpreted launch, a test mistaken for an attack, or a limited strike that crosses a red line. Retaliation follows. Missiles are exchanged. Some are intercepted, some are not. Oil infrastructure becomes a target. Shipping routes are disrupted. The Strait of Hormuz becomes a choke point. Global oil prices spike sharply, possibly exceeding $120 per barrel in a matter of days, according to projections cited in past crisis scenarios by major financial institutions. Markets react, supply chains tighten, inflation pressures rise globally. This is what that means for your gas prices, your grocery bill, your savings. And then comes the real danger. Once escalation reaches that level, de-escalation becomes politically and militarily difficult. Each side must maintain credibility. Each move must be answered. That is how regional conflicts expand. Scenario B, negotiation path. Now consider the alternative. The reveal of this capability, real or perceived, creates leverage. Back-channel communications begin. Diplomatic channels reopen. Regional actors push for de-escalation. The United States signals willingness to re-engage on certain issues, possibly sanctions relief tied to verifiable limits on missile development. Iran, having demonstrated strength, enters negotiations from a position it views as improved. Tensions remain, but they are managed. Markets stabilize. Military postures remain elevated but controlled. This is not peace, but it is containment. Now here is the reality. Both scenarios are plausible, and both can shift rapidly based on a single event. That is why the next 72 hours will be decisive, because in that window, signals will emerge. Will there be another test? Will there be a military response? Will diplomatic channels activate quietly behind the scenes? Will this remain a demonstration or become a confrontation? Those are the questions that matter now, and the answers are coming fast. Which brings us to the final step, connecting everything we have discussed into one clear picture. Let us bring all of these threads together. Iran has unveiled what it claims is a hypersonic missile, capable of extreme speeds, maneuverability, and the potential to bypass existing missile defense systems. Whether those claims are fully accurate or not, the trajectory of Iran's missile development shows clear and measurable progress. Here is why that matters. Because even the perception of a breakthrough begins to erode decades of strategic assumptions. Assumptions that systems like Patriot, THAAD, and Aegis could reliably intercept incoming threats. That shift triggers a chain reaction. Defense systems lose certainty. Deterrence becomes unstable. Decision-making windows shrink, and the risk of miscalculation rises sharply. At the same time, this is not just a military story. It is economic. It is political. It is global. Energy markets, supply chains, and daily costs, from fuel to food, are all directly exposed to instability in this region. And then there is the broader power dynamic. The United States is trying to maintain strategic dominance in a changing technological landscape. Iran is leveraging asymmetry and perception to expand its influence, and China is caught in the middle, dependent on stability, yet positioned within a shifting balance of power. All of these forces are now converging at once. The question is not whether this changes the strategic landscape. The question is whether the systems designed for yesterday's threats can adapt fast enough to handle what is coming next. That is what we do here at Crisis Reporting. We break down complex global events and show you exactly what they mean, clearly, precisely, and in real time. If you want to stay ahead of stories like this before they fully unfold, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications right now, because the next update on this situation could come at any moment, and when it does, you do not want to be catching up after the fact. And if you found this analysis valuable, share this with someone who needs to understand what is happening beneath the headlines. This is World Crisis Reporting. Stay informed. Stay ahead.